Order, please. Before we begin the daily routine, the subject for this evening's late debate was submitted by the Honourable Member for Waverley Fall River Beaver Bank. Be it resolved that the members of this House commend all of the Nova Scotian workers and volunteers on their tireless efforts to restore electrical power and provide services to the residents of all communities affected by Hurricane Juan. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the daily routine presenting reading petitions. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
I beg leave to table a petition on behalf of the residents of Kites Hill Drive and Grand Lake Road in Cape Breton Nova. The operative clause which says, the citizens of Victoria Heights subdivision, Kites Hill Drive, for the past numbers of years have some grave concerns when entering or exiting the Glace Bay Highway number 4 to or from the street. The concerns have been brought to the attention of governments in power on several occasions with little success. However, each time we have assured it would be in the next budget or estimates. I have affixed my signature to this petition.
Thank you. Document is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a petition signed by 3,395 Nova Scotians and others in support of enhanced services and programs for children with autism spectrum disorder, specifically applied behavior analysis. Mr. Speaker, I have affixed my signature.
Petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. Table of reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Premier, I beg leave. I hereby give notice that on a future date, I guess, that I shall move adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia actress Laura Regan is presently taking Hollywood by storm, playing the lead role as Jessica Lynch, the captured U.S. soldier rescued from a Baghdad prison camp in the NBC television movie to air in prime time later this fall. And whereas this past Tuesday evening, Laura was a special guest star in the CBS primetime drama Judging Amy, playing the role of a social worker trainee. And whereas Laura is the youngest and proud daughter of former Nova Scotia Premier Gerald Regan and his wife Carol, therefore be it resolved that MLAs in this House of Assembly extend our sincere congratulations to Laura on her outstanding achievements and wish her every success as she moves onward and upward in her acting career. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in celebration of International Adult Learners Week from September 7th to 13th, events and presentations were held in more than 50 countries to celebrate achievements and to promote all forms of adult learning. And whereas across Nova Scotia, the week was celebrated with events and activities designed to promote the benefits of learning in the home, at work, and in the community, and to highlight the many options available to adult learners in this province. Whereas learning is an essential tool that helps individuals and societies grow, contributing to every aspect of life, the economy, our communities, family life, and recreation. And those participating develop skills and confidence that enable them to embrace change and seize new opportunities. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House acknowledge the real importance of lifelong learning for the individuals involved and for the communities in which they live. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cape Breton Dr. Murdoch Smith has been named the top family physician in Nova Scotia this year by the College of Family Physicians of Canada, and whereas the Sydney physician was chosen by the College of Family Physicians for the commitments he has made and still makes to to his patients, his profession, his community, and to his family. And whereas graduating from Dalhousie University Medical School in 1969, Sydney-born Murdoch Smith soon returned to his hometown to practice medicine and has become a well-respected and integral part of the community. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate Dr. Murdoch Smith on his top recognition and applaud his longtime dedication and service to medicine and his community. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Alliance Atlantis Communications Incorporated has donated the Alliance Atlantis Academy building on Brunswick Street to the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. Whereas the Academy has been used as a school facility, as well as a set for various film and television productions since its opening, which will provide an inspiring atmosphere for NASCAD's undergraduate film program. And whereas the new building will house the undergraduate program's 35 students and 4 faculty members in the Alliance Atlantis graduate program when it launches in 2004. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House thank Alliance Atlantis Communications Incorporated for their generosity in donating the Academy to the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, and wish the film program students good luck as they continue on in their studies. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, I give notice on a future day. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Agriculture Awareness Committee is pleased to be hosting the second annual Open Farm Day on Sunday, October 5, 2003. And whereas on this day, 52 farms will open their farms to the public so that they will have an opportunity to experience the life and work of a farm business. And whereas this event is a great opportunity for producers to showcase their operations and raise public awareness for agriculture, therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House recognize October 5, 2003 as Open Farm Day in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this past Sunday, Energy and Mines ministers from across Canada came to Halifax for an annual 2-day conference to address common issues in mining, energy supply, electricity generation, and transmission. And whereas despite the devastating aftermath of Hurricane Juan, these federal, provincial, and territorial ministers remain committed to the conference, continue to meet through difficult circumstances. And whereas yesterday's meeting of energy ministers resulted in a national commitment to work together on several critical issues regarding the generation, transmission, and reliability of our electrical systems, renewable energy, research and development, and energy supply, therefore be it resolved that members of this House offer our sincere thanks to our federal, provincial, and territorial colleagues for their understanding and compassion and their unfailing commitment to ensuring that Canada's energy issues receive the full attention they deserve, even in times of considerable distress. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Order of Nova Scotia is our province's highest honour and is bestowed on those Nova Scotians who have given of themselves, their time and their talent, and have made extraordinary contributions to our people and our province. And whereas Sister Dorothy Moore of Member 2 was a well-respected elder and a leader in education, devoting many years to the preservation and restoration of the Mi'kmaq language and culture, and whereas largely because of her efforts, the Nova Scotia Department of Education has developed a provincial Mi'kmaq language curriculum, ensuring the language posterity and that young Mi'kmaq have access to the language of their history and culture. Therefore, it be it resolved, this House congratulates Sister Dorothy Moore on being named to the Order of Nova Scotia and acknowledges the importance of her life's work for the people of this province. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to introduce an act to amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labor Standards Code, and Chapter 494 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Vital Statistics Act.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labour Standards Code, and Chapter 494 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Vital Statistics Act.
Bill numbered 7, entitled An Act to amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labor Standards Code, and Chapter 494 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Vital Statistics Act.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. Notice of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the area of Debert has long been regarded as a place of great historical significance to the Mi'kmaq people of Nova Scotia, and whereas the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq, led by Executive Director Mr. Donald M. Julian, has taken the lead in developing a Mi'kmaq Cultural Center in Debert, and whereas on September 25th marked the grand opening of the Mi'kmaq Debert Interpretive Trail with a special presentation of Mi'kmaq history and culture, therefore be it resolved that on this day, the 250th anniversary commemorating Treaty Day, that the House of Assembly congratulate Mr. Donald M. Julian, the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq, the Nova Scotia Assembly of Mi'kmaq Chiefs for its efforts to protect and promote Mi'kmaq culture and heritage. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 3 days ago, Nova Scotia suffered its worst natural disaster, and approximately 150,000 residents are still without power. And whereas in my riding of Halifax, Clayton Park, many people still affected by power outages are seniors living in apartment buildings. And whereas we should be concerned that these seniors have no access to media for information, their food supplies have spoiled, and they need assistance to cope with everyday life. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House encourage this government to effectively reach out to all seniors that may be having difficulty during these trying times. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Canning resident Darlene Ward recognized that computer literacy is a vital skill in today's job market, and whereas in the fall of 2002, Ms. Ward entered the Office Information Technology program at the Kings Tech campus of the Nova Scotia Community College to gain the skills she needed to be successful in her future career, and whereas as part of her program, Ms. Ward is assisting area midwife Jen White to write a funding proposal for a project that will assist low-income teenage mothers. Therefore be resolved that the members of this House recognize Darlene Ward for her efforts to develop her job skills and recognize all those who work so hard at providing Nova Scotians with a fine education at the Kings Tech campus of the Nova Scotia Community College. I request waiver.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the people of Dartmouth North have a long, proud tradition of pulling together and helping neighbors in time of need, and whereas virtually every street and neighborhood in Dartmouth North was devastated by Hurricane Juan, leaving thousands of people without the necessities of life, and whereas the people of Dartmouth North went out of their way to share the food, water, and shelter they had with those who were without the necessities, therefore be it resolved that this Legislative Assembly can commend the people of Dartmouth North and all of Metro for showing the kind of compassion and caring for others that we have become known for. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the NDP claimed that public auto insurance is the only viable option for the people of Nova Scotia, and whereas the member for Halifax Fairview publicly supports a cap on contingency fees for lawyers specializing in personal injuries derived from automobile accidents because these fees drive up the cost of insurance, And whereas the leader of the NDP, who specialized in personal injury cases, is opposed to a cap on contingency fees, therefore be it resolved, the NDP please clarify as to whether they are truly committed to reducing the rates for Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for a waiver of notice.
Waiver. Here are several noes. Notice is tabled. The honourable member Colchester, Muscatawbet Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Canada's national defence system has been gutted to such a critical level where private companies are now being looked at to conduct air patrols over both the east and west coasts of Canada, whereas Canada's Navy and its Maritime Command Impact Assessment Report for 2003 noted that in the past decade, since the federal Liberals first took office in Ottawa, the Navy has seen a 54% reduction in the number of Aurora flying hours. And whereas the report continued, saying money problems have limited the availability of spare parts for the Auroras and flying hours for all of the Air Force's planes. Therefore, be it resolved that MLAs in this House of Assembly take a proactive approach and agree that with unanimous approval of this resolution, the Speaker will send a letter notifying the National Minister of Defence of this House of Assembly's grave concern about his government's ability to adequately provide proper aircraft surveillance for Canada. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice.
Request for waiver. Here a no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Order of Canada is our country's highest honour awarded to individuals who have made a difference in various fields of human endeavour, and whereas Clotilda Yatmachuk has served in various capacities, including on staff development and education services in the Cape Breton Regional Hospital as a member of the African Canadian Advisory Committee to the Nova Scotia Community College as a member and chairperson of Eastern Regional Health Board, and whereas on August the 5th, Clotilda Yatmachuk was appointed to the Order of Canada in recognition for her many years of community service and outstanding achievements. Therefore, it be resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate Clotilda Yatmachuk for this well-deserved recognition and commend her for her commitment and dedication she has demonstrated to the community of Cape Breton and to the province of Nova Scotia. I request waiver, please.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to present my resolution in French first and then with a translation. Monsieur le Président, par la présente, j'avise que je proposerai à une date ultérieure l'adoption de la résolution suivante. Attendu que le 5 septembre, Mme Barbara Leblanc a reçu la médaille Léger-Comeau. Attendu que Mme Leblanc fait la promotion de la culture acadienne et du patrimoine acadien sans relâche. Attendu que Mme Leblanc a récemment publié un livre sur la culture et la valeur symbolique du lieu historique de Grand Pré, qu'il soit résolu que cette Chambre exprime ses félicitations et transmet ses meilleurs vœux de succès à Mme Leblanc. Monsieur le Président, je propose l'adoption de cette résolution sans préavis et sans débat. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on September the 5th, 2003, Mme Barbara Leblanc received la médaille Léger-Comeau, and whereas Mme Barbara Leblanc is an outstanding promoter of the Acadian culture and heritage, and whereas Mme Leblanc has recently published a book on the cultural and symbolic values of the Grand Pré historical site, therefore it be resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Mme Barbara Leblanc upon receiving this prestigious award. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas for nearly 50 years, from 1920 to 1969, the old Londonderry School was a place where memories were made and strong bonds were built. And whereas a three-room schoolhouse with students from grades primary to 11, Londonderry School had a special community feeling, and just this past summer, after a year of planning, more than 200 people returned to their old school to meet former friends and teachers and visit the place where they grew up. And whereas gathered at their old school, now the Londonderry Community Center, people looked through nearly 50 years of photos and memorabilia and took time to be reacquainted and relive the school time memories. Therefore, be it resolved that all MLAs commend the members of the Londonderry School Reunion Planning Committee for their efforts in organizing this happy reunion. Mr. Speaker, I request waivers.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sunday, September 28th was National Peace and Police Officers Memorial Day. Whereas communities across the province are thankful for the sacrifices and efforts of law enforcement officers day in and day out. And whereas too many families across Nova Scotia have experienced the loss of a loved one who served in law enforcement. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize and pay tribute to the efforts and sacrifices of peace and police officers across the province and pay tribute to the memory of those who have died in the line of duty. I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Gary Soller is an outstanding member of the Lake Echo community as a volunteer in the RCMP Citizens on Patrol, and whereas Gary retired from the Lake Echo Community Office in February 2003 due to poor health. Whereas the absence of Gary from the Lake Echo Community Office will leave a great void in the community policing. Therefore, it be resolved that the members of this House honor Gary Soller for his years of dedicated service to the community of Lake Echo and its residents. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask waiver, notice, and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Pictou County firefighters have been recognized for their tremendous efforts to raise money to assist people living with muscular dystrophy. And whereas Pictou County Firefighters Association President Don Wadden accepted the MDAC Atlantic Region Fire Department of the Year Award on behalf of all firefighters of the PCFA. And whereas over the past 20 years, members of the PCFA have raised a total of $81,000 to assist people living with neuromuscular disorders. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House join with me congratulating Don Wadden and all members of the Pictou County Firefighters Association on winning the MDAC Atlantic Region Fire Department of the Year Award and extend our appreciation for their many efforts they make to our communities better and safer places to live, and I ask for waiver.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax, Shabakto.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the government has pointed with pride to 93 words from an old news release which was reprinted on the front page of the Sunday Herald as evidence that Nova Scotians were warned to get ready for Hurricane Juan. And whereas the government has not yet explained why it held no briefings, issued no evacuation order or other alerts about this particular hurricane, and provided no specific warnings about this storm to those in its path. And whereas any improvement in future preparation for serious storms must begin with a thorough assessment of recent experience. Therefore, be it resolved that this House urges the government to engage in a thorough and open assessment of how the province prepared for Hurricane Juan, which respects the dedication and tremendous effort of emergency measures workers while ensuring that they can serve Nova Scotians even better the next time a major storm threatens our province. And, Mr. Speaker, I do seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Agreed. Here and no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas October 1st is International Day of the Older Person, and whereas today worldwide there are 600 million individuals 60 years of age and over, with this number doubling by the year 2025. And whereas in our fast-aging world, older people will increasingly play a critical role through volunteer work, transmitting experience and knowledge, helping their families with caring responsibilities, and increasing their participation in the paid labor force. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the legislature acknowledge today, October 1st, as the International Day of the Older Person, and extend our appreciation to those older persons who on a daily basis strive to make our communities a better place in which to live. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to rise on a point of order, please. Yesterday, during question period, the member from Halifax Citadel and Halifax Shabakto, and again today, the member from Halifax Shabakto, both felt the need to point out the first news release issued by our government about Hurricane Juan was Sunday at 5 o'clock. And I was just wanted to table for all members copies of the news release issued by the government on September 4th, advising all Nova Scotians that hurricane season was indeed upon us, while also advising various safety tips one could take. I also wanted to table a release from June 24th of this year, noting the fact that Canadian and American emergency experts were meeting here in Halifax for 3 days to discuss increased methods for cross-border cooperation in times of emergencies, such as we just had. So for those two representative members to say that they did what they did yesterday and again today about an event on Sunday evening's magnitude was clearly erroneous, and I'd like to table the documents to support my argument.
Order, please. It's not a point of order. It's a disagreement of facts between two members, or three, or four, whichever. Orders of the day or questions put by members. Question period begin at 2:35. Will end at 4:05. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. The news that Toronto-based Manulife Financial is buying Maritime Life has left some 1,100 people who work for their company with concerns about the future of their jobs, and has left concerns about the future of the entire operation. Manulife has indicated that a review of operations will take place before any job cuts are decided upon, and that they would give the government the opportunity to meet with the company about the impact on the province. So my question, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier is what meetings or discussions have taken place with Manulife about their plans for the Halifax operations?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I share the concern of the member opposite relative to the news that Maritime Life, in fact, is part of the takeover of John Hancock, an American firm. The officials at Maritime Life briefed me on the weekend as to the impending news. Following that, I had a meeting on Monday prior to their news conference, giving me some of the information that they later made available by way of the news media. This is distressing news. One of the good news stories in Nova Scotia has been the success of a major financial institution, Maritime Life. We have to deal now with the reality that a corporate takeover in essence has occurred, but we will be working with the officials of Manulife Life, with Mr. Black, and also with the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Affairs in Ottawa to maximize the potential of employment opportunities in the new structure.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We now know that the Premier has known about this for 4 days. And I would ask, Mr. Speaker, when this government, or I would say, Mr. Speaker, that when this government established Nova Scotia Business, Inc., they said that keeping, growing, and attracting business to the province would be its chief mandate. On NSBI's website, they say they're committed to retaining Nova Scotia businesses. In recent throne speeches, the government has recommitted themselves to NSBI and their way of doing things. So, Mr. Speaker, my question is, where are they now? Mr. Premier, can you tell this House what detailed plan of action NSBI has to keep the operations of Maritime Life in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What will occur in the weeks ahead is that the Nova Scotia government and Nova Scotia Business, Inc. Will do those things that are mandated to us by the people of Nova Scotia to maximize opportunities here in Nova Scotia. One of the good things is that until April of the year 2004, none of this can happen because it really only becomes effective in April. So we do have time to work on remedial situations. Now, having said that, it's not all good between now and April because Obviously, Maritime Life will not be engaging new people, and they won't be replacing people that may make a choice to leave that institution. On the other hand, nothing major can happen until April of next spring. So we do have some lead time, which we will utilize to maximum benefit to achieve what we all in this House would like to achieve.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Premier knows that that lead time will be used to develop a business plan for the future of the operations of Maritime Life. So my question is really prefaced, Mr. Speaker, by saying that Mr. Fred Morley from the Greater Halifax Partnership is quoted as saying that Nova Scotia is well placed to successfully fight to keep Maritime Life jobs as long as we're armed with a good business plan. I want to know from the Premier what business plan has been developed by his government to share with Manulife in order to fight to retain the 1,100 high-quality jobs here in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we do have some natural advantages. I do know that of all of the Maritime Life operations, this was the operation that was the most efficient. It provided the employees with that were the most loyal to the company. We do have some great strengths here in Halifax that we will be able to make the Halifax situation attractive to the new owners. And we will work with all of those who are prepared to work with us to put forward the business case to which you have referred that will make Nova Scotia and Halifax in particular attractive to significant activity within the new corporate structure.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the 168 residents of Sir John Thompson Senior Complex have been without power since Sunday. Until last night, there were no emergency lights in the hallways, despite regulations that require emergency lights in those areas. These residents have had no contact with emergency officials since except for the Red Cross, who yesterday dropped off water and granola bars in the common area. Unfortunately, residents in wheelchairs don't have access to the common area. And now people like Ken Carroll are at a greater disadvantage because they use a battery-operated scooter and can't recharge his scooter. He told me he feels trapped in his own building. The real tragedy from Hurricane Juan is the people who have been left in the dark, not just by the hurricane itself, but by this government. My question is to the Premier. What is being done to reach out to provide meaningful support and information to seniors like Ken Carroll and others who feel trapped in their apartments?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the question. It is a good question. The government has provided a series of contacts that people can take advantage of if, in fact, they are in unusual circumstances as a result of the power failure in Halifax and in other areas across the province. And if the member opposite could categorize those individual requirements, we can provide the member opposite with the telephone numbers that can be accessed to provide specific help in a specific instance.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party in your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, there are countless Ken Carrolls across this province who are without electricity. And it is the responsibility of this government to provide a level of leadership to find those people in their apartment buildings and to provide them with the support that they need. These people need electricity. They also need outside support and information. They need safe and nutritious meals, and they definitely need their medication. People like Ellen Fahey of the same building, who ventured out to the grocery store just in the last day, but she became ill in the store and had to be assisted back to her building because she didn't have her medication. The pharmacy was without power. My question to the Premier: what is the Premier and his government doing to ensure that the Ellen Faheys and the Ken Carrolls are receiving proper personal attention in every building without Nova Scotia that doesn't have electricity?
The Honourable the Premier.
Speaker, and I can provide the member opposite with the contact numbers
that will allow people to contact government if they have specific requirements that are being generated as a result of being without power. Those contacts are available, and one of the responsibilities that we all have as MLAs is to seek out these people in our constituencies and provide them with the proper information. We're doing it in our constituencies. I would hope you're doing it in yours.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party, and your final supplementary.
Shame on you.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier hopes that everyone in Nova Scotia receives the newspaper or watches TV or listens to the radio. And it's clear that the blackout is happening to more than just the 100,000 Nova Scotians. It's happening with this government that doesn't understand that people don't have electricity. This is an emergency. Although I'm reminded that the Premier doesn't consider it an emergency, this is about more than just restoring power, and it's about more than just having a phone number to call to have information received. Nova Scotia Power is not charged with the responsibility of leading this government. This government is charged with that responsibility. So for people without electricity, especially the more vulnerable Nova Scotians, it's about finding simply the ways to get by. So, Mr. Premier, what are you doing to support the basic needs of Nova Scotians, to give them information, to provide them with support that they so desperately need right now?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Community Services has some specific information that will be of interest to the member opposite.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for giving us a chance to talk about some of the things that have been done and some of the things that have been put in place. Of course, as the Premier pointed out, when one does become aware of somebody that's in need of assistance, it's very helpful to connect them with the appropriate organization. But Mr. Speaker, I think that the member opposite would probably know that the department works with various organizations. We have a contract with the Red Cross to provide emergency food and shelter. This, in fact, was in place. They set up, in fact, an emergency shelter on Gottingen Street during this time. We're also working with HRM's emergency response organization, and they had 4 emergency shelters, and it's good that the leader of the Liberal Party recognizes that, in fact, we did not wait for everybody to come in. We were out there delivering food and water and seniors apartments, and in fact, we went to some of the public housing complexes which we thought were in need, and we were trying to assist them. So, Mr. Speaker, we could go on at some length, and perhaps we'll have a chance to do so further on in question period. And I thank the leader of the Liberal Party for allowing me to point out some of these steps that have been taken.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister responsible for homeowners insurance. Hurricane Juan brought to light one of the crucial problems that we have in this province, the increased difficulty in getting home and tenant insurance. My office has been contacted by a single mother who could not get home insurance, as an example. Luckily, she escaped damages from the hurricane, but she is worried about what happens next time. My question, Mr. Minister, what plans does your government have to address the availability of home and tenant insurance?
The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I would suggest to the Leader of the Opposition that this is an appropriate time to make that observation, since we have a bill on the floor of the House, the Auto Insurance Reform Bill, which will set in place a review board for insurance matters related to automobiles, but as well, Mr. Speaker, that same board will be monitoring the casualty, property, and liability insurance issues, Mr. Speaker, as brought forward by people in the public and through the consumer advocate that we have at the present time in the Department of Environment and Labor.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the Minister just didn't hear or didn't want to hear the question. These are people who can't get insurance, to whom home and tenant insurance is not available. All the review boards in the world isn't going to make any difference to them. If you can't get the insurance in the first place or you can't afford it, then there's a problem. On Sunday, Hurricane Juan tore off the roof of an apartment building of a couple who just a week before had been denied insurance. They been told by this government that they should rely on private insurance to deal with damage caused by the hurricane. My question, Mr. Minister, if that is your position, how are you specifically going to address the concerns of people who have been denied homeowner and tenant insurance?
Good question.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, insurance is a very individual matter, and I would appreciate it if the Honourable Leader of the Opposition would provide to me the name of this company who are unable to obtain insurance, and I'll pass it on to the Superintendent of Insurance, and we'll look into that matter.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Speaker, the minister is being willfully blind to a situation that exists right across this province. It's not about one person. It's about all of the people in this province who cannot access home insurance, who cannot access tenant insurance. That is the problem. And yet this government today has issued a news release saying that relief will not go. Disaster relief will not go to those who could have had insurance, regardless of whether or not they were denied. So my question is this: why is it that this government has brought forward a disaster relief program that will disenfranchise the very people who need it the most?
Good question.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition seems to be very long on rhetoric but very short on action. I've already advised the honourable member of what he should be doing. He also has EMO that he can contact, Mr. Speaker. I would say, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps the Leader of the Opposition should recognize that he's also an MLA representing people.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Sir, have you called for or held a press conference since this disaster began?
Honourable Premier.
No.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your first supplementary.
Have you done a formal tour, Mr. Premier, of the affected areas, either on foot or by helicopter? A formal tour, sir.
The Honourable Premier.
And I well appreciate that particular question. Yes, on Monday I toured my own area of the province, Pictou County, and viewed the extensive damage. On Monday as well, I toured some of the heavily damaged areas in Truro. Yesterday I toured some of the west end of the peninsula here in Halifax, and as well have been over on the Dartmouth side looking at the damage over there. In the hours leading up to the House today, I did an aerial surveillance of the CBRM area. As well, I was accompanied by the minister responsible for EMO. And so the answer to that question is yes.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party in your final supplementary.
Appreciate the answer. There are times when question period really...
Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on the final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, sometimes question period is about asking questions and finding answers, something that Nova Scotians have had dear trouble finding when it comes to this disaster.
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, the question that we have for the Premier is quite simple. What coordination is being provided to people on the ground who require it? Actual information if they don't have electricity, they don't have a radio, they don't have a television, and they're not receiving a newspaper. What leadership is being provided?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I refer that to the minister responsible for EMO.
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to the member opposite. This government, through Emergency Measures Organization, which I might explain to the member opposite, encompasses not only this provincial government and every department, it encompasses all levels of municipal government, as well as federal agency, as well as the Red Cross, as well as rescue, certainly includes at this point the armed forces, and as well as all our health services. They're carefully coordinated and have been working on the lead up to the Hurricane Juan since last Friday. Since the hurricane was over in the wee hours of Sunday morning,
all those dedicated individuals and volunteers, huge numbers I might add, have been working tirelessly not only to provide information directly to the media through news releases from the various agencies as well as press conferences that I've attended, but as well, this government made the effort yesterday, since it was so crucial to get to people that may have not have talked to their neighbor, may not have had batteries for their radio. Emergency numbers were supplied to the member opposite. It was supplied to every member in this House, so that when they run into those circumstances or encountered them, as the member is concerned about, that they would be able to distribute those numbers. So I think, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member's question is a good one, but the information is being provided with all means possible.
The honourable member for Halifax-Shabakto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister responsible for emergency measures. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is empowered to declare a state of emergency in some or all of the province by Clause 12.1 of the Emergency Measures Act. To be clear, the Minister can declare an emergency, a state of emergency, in advance of the actual events. But the pre-hurricane attitude is evident from a news report posted at 1:56 p.m. this past Friday, which was headlined, "Juan to bring showers to province." Why did the Minister not declare a state of emergency in advance of this hurricane in order to provide leadership in urging people to prepare in every possible way?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Speaker, the honourable member certainly is well aware, if he had the opportunity to glance at or read or study in depth papers such as the Chronicle Herald on last Saturday and Sunday. On both occasions, it listed the necessities of being prepared boldly on the front page in the collar, being prepared for a hurricane, what precautions to take, and certainly every organization connected with EMO was doing their utmost to warn people of the dangers of the approaching hurricane.
The honourable member for Halifax-Shabakto on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, every Nova Scotian, of course, appreciates how the EMO staff and others have been working flat out to help people deal with the consequences of the hurricane. But it is simply a fact that no emergency measures advisories were issued over the weekend. It is now widely understood that in times of crisis, people expect their elected leaders to provide specific advice and accurate information, in this case, in advance. Why did the government decide that its leaders would not take an active role in urging all possible preparation for this emergency? And why did the minister decide not to issue advisories over the weekend?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And obviously, the member opposite is a bit confused on advisories and what EMO means. EMO is the culmination of all provincial agencies, all municipal agencies dealing with rescue, dealing with fire, dealing with health, dealing with social services. All those groups were at a state of preparedness. All forms of the media that could be used during that time was advising the residents of this province that a hurricane was imminent, to take precautions, to ensure that they had staples, batteries. All the precautions were taken, and the advisement to the citizens were made in those media forums. Certainly the member opposite can't deny that.
The honourable member for Halifax-Shabakto on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, in the United States, where hurricanes are much more common, the authorities have been willing to, and they routinely issue warnings in advance, and they ask people to take precautions when they think that they're in the path of a hurricane. Other governments have sought the active cooperation of broadcasters, newspapers, to provide every possible warning and detailed advice rather than leaving people to interpret weather forecasts for themselves. Mr. Speaker, what I'd like to know from the minister is how will he and his government review its role and consider other measures that can be taken whenever a major emergency is anticipated?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much. And again, I guess the important thing is to point out to the honourable member those radio stations throughout Nova Scotia that were personed on Sunday afternoon rather than the recorded broadcasting was initiated by this government, by EMO, by this minister in conjunction with storm warnings. The articles supplied to newspapers, the recommendations were put there because EMO was doing their job, and the situation was constantly monitored with as much information as possible being supplied to the general public, as well as all people involved in EMO, ensuring that they had access to materials, supplies, that centers were open, and that warnings were going out to people asking them not to be near water's edge, such as Peggy's Cove, Lawrencetown, waterfronts. Those actions were all taken. Obviously, the member opposite must have been doing something else on Sunday last.
Order, please. Just a reminder to all members to direct their questions and answers through the speaker, please, as opposed directly to each member. The honourable member for Digby-Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Act. Mr. Speaker, it is clearly evident that the appropriate emergency procedure were not in place for Hurricane Juan. Mr. Speaker, we only have to look at how much advance warning was given to the citizens of Nova Scotia that Hurricane Juan was on its way. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is very simple. Minister, when were you personally aware that Hurricane Juan was going to hit Nova Scotia?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Speaker, obviously the hurricane, once it formed late last week, EMO was aware of it and certainly is minister responsible. Preparations began late Thursday, continued through Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And I would say to the member opposite, I certainly hope that he was able to obtain a copy of the Chronicle Herald and read of that event on Saturday and Sunday also, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member for Digby-Annapolis on your first supplementary.
This is a serious matter, Junior.
Mr. Speaker, my question is again to the minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Act. Mr. Speaker, the minister did not issue a press release until 5:07 p.m. on the evening of September the 28th. Mr. Speaker, they didn't even start evacuating citizens that were in harm's way until the hurricane was on our doorsteps. Mr. Speaker, the minister may not know this, but a popular way for notifying citizens that an emergency is on the horizon is in the form of a crawl along the bottom of one television screen. We all know that the people like to watch TV on Sunday nights, so my question to the minister is, when did you first authorize the use of a crawl to be used on our local TV stations such as ATV, CBC, and Global, and what was the time that it first appeared?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member again for his question. And I'd also like to read from this document, and I certainly will table it. And this is Saturday, September the 28th, and I assume the member opposite has ATV available on his channel as well. And this is an EMO advising Maritimers to get ready. And this is Sheila Tulloch reporting for EMO and the minister. You should review an emergency kit. Things that should be in it include a supply of water, battery-powered radio, a flashlight, extra candles, matches, foods, things you need in case the power goes out. Homeowners are also advised to remove any dead branches from trees and to secure any loose objects like lawn chairs, barbecues. Finding a safe spot for the family in case of emergency is also advised. Ken Kirkwood, National Hurricane Center. It's going to be a significant storm as it approaches Nova Scotia. As I mentioned, we're going to have wind warnings out for pretty much all of mainland Nova Scotia. Heavy rainfall warnings are out for Nova Scotia as well. These are just a number of the ATV reports supplied on Saturday in the lead-up. I assume that the honourable member has a TV.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Digby-Annapolis on his final supplementary. The honourable minister will table that.
Mr. Speaker, I know a lot of people who don't take the Chronicle Herald, a lot of them. Mr. Speaker, my final question. My final question to the Minister of the Emergency Measure Act. Mr. Speaker, it may be interesting to some to know that the Manitoba government has issued a press release yesterday from their minister responsible for emergency measure organizations. Mr. Speaker, they are establishing a new joint emergency alert system so Manitobans will receive information on potential emergencies in a more timely manner. No doubt, Mr. Speaker, they watched how the Tory government in Nova Scotia fumbled on Sunday evening and apparently do not want to make the same mistakes. My question to the minister is, will the minister finally admit to Nova Scotians that under his directions, the EMO was clearly unprepared to handle the emergency that arose from the effects of Hurricane Juan?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would assume the honourable member will have the Manitoba Legislature and Minister put that out on the TV, in the newspaper, and possibly radio as well to report that to the citizens. But in regard to his question, I'd like to table this as well. Hurricane Juan churns towards Nova Scotia. Byline on Saturday, September the 27th, the Halifax Herald Limited. A tropical visitor is heading our way straight for Nova Scotia, packing winds of 120 kilometers sustained as expected to dump rain and water on parts of Nova Scotia. The byline with it on the side, the provincial emergency measure organization says things are the same as reported by the reporter and that a hurricane storm approaches the province. Obviously, the papers in this province report what the government and EMO supply to the citizens. The ATV News does. Obviously, the opposition didn't have a chance on the weekend to see it.
The Honourable Member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Minister of Fisheries. I'd like to table photographs of the wharf in the historic village of Prospect. And I know, Mr. Speaker, I'm not allowed props. This is the before, this is the after. And I'm going to table them now. These Nova Scotians need help, Mr. Speaker. They need help cleaning up the debris before they can even start to replace damaged wharves, buildings. And from where I was this morning, and where from the member from Halifax Atlantic is currently, time to actually replace important parts of their lives. It's an emotional, scary opportunity when you see people who've lived in that community their entire life break down and talk about how lucky they are. So my question to the minister is, what immediate help can these Nova Scotians living in coastal communities expect from your department immediately?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Well, I want to thank the member for the question, and I did spend a fair amount of time the last 2 days surveying the damage across this province, whether it be in the agricultural sector, in the Stewiacke, in the Musquodoboit, in the Colchester areas, and of course this morning going down and checking out the areas of Sambro, of Prospect, of Herring Cove, and those areas. And it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific to see the damage that this hurricane has provided for us. It is a tribute to the fishermen and the people in those areas that they did survive this, that there is no loss of lives. I know they did spend a fair amount of time watching their equipment, watching their homes, watching their vessels, and making sure that there was no more losses than there was. We are doing an inventory at this point to find out what the losses are, to have a better handle on that, so that when we do sit down with our federal counterparts, when the Minister of the EMO will be sitting down with them, that we will have a good idea of what we need to provide for these fishermen.
Now, member for Timberlea Prospect on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, Mr. Speaker, I heard the soothing words from the rookie cabinet minister. I actually realized at time I thought he was going to say, "I feel your pain." Yet, I want to inform that minister of this press release from the minister responsible for EMO in which it says, and I will table this so the minister from Fisheries will realize feeling the pain is not going to help considering the words that are on this paper. Under terms of the province's disaster assistance policy, help is only available for uninsurable damages. This means that if losses sustained in the hurricane are or could have been insured through personal or corporate insurance, then they are not eligible. Mr. Minister, what did you tell those fishermen, and what does this mean to them now?
Now, Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to say that's a very pointy finger. It is very important. It's very important for us to get out there. This is a very serious issue, and I know it is, and that's why that I was out there trying to understand the impacts to the community. That's why that is ongoing. That is why we're doing an inventory, and that's why we'll be sitting down with the federal minister as soon as possible to table the damage and our estimates on repair. Thank you very much.
Now, remember, Kimberley Prospect on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, our fishing communities are made up of real people like Barry Sloan-White and Everett Pettipaw, who the minister took the time to meet with today. These men and their families, they want people with power to get things rolling to come and assess the situation in person. Now, my advice to that minister and to that premier is to set up a community meeting in Sambro, set up a community meeting in the village of Prospect, set up a community meeting in Terrence Bay, and go to those communities and sit and listen to them. Are you prepared to do that, Mr. Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
I'd like to thank the member for that suggestion. I will take it under advisement, and I will continue to lobby the federal government through our Minister of VMO to help the fishermen. And I just want to preface this also by saying that my father is a fisherman and has been a fisherman for close to 40 years. And he'd be very happy that I'm helping out. Thank you, sir.
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries has order, please. The Honourable member bring himself to order. I'll ask him to leave. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries has the floor.
And I understand the problems that these communities are under, the stress that these are under. The lobster season is upon us. It's less than 2 months away. The people have been working very hard at getting their equipment ready, their ropes, their buoys. And Mr. Speaker, a lot of these guys have lost their buoys, their ropes, and all their equipment. So I understand what they're going through, and we're going to be helping them as best we can in the days to come. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, Hurricane Juan has left a path of destruction that's quite visible as you travel throughout HRM and surrounding areas. But what is not so visible is the impact that Hurricane Juan had on those individuals who were scheduled for elective surgeries. Mr. Speaker, more surgeries, and many of them were canceled. And in addition, doctors who have patients that can't be discharged cannot do so in homes because they do not have power there, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the minister is, has the Department of Health provided any assistance to the Capital District in developing an action plan that will deal with the backlog of surgeries?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We are in constant contact with the Capital District Health Authority, and the problem to which the honourable member refers, of course, is a problem that cannot be resolved through the waving of a wand. There are some very real difficulties that have to be overcome in order for the surgeries to get back on schedule. We are working with the authorities in the Capital Health people in the hospitals to ensure that as quickly as possible the surgeries are rescheduled and things can move back toward a normal situation.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In addition to the surgeries and the backlog, equally serious, Mr. Speaker, is the issue regarding emergency rooms as well. Because of the power outage, many doctors' offices are closed, and people are finding themselves arriving at emergency rooms and waiting 10 to 12 hours to be seen. Some are leaving without receiving any assistance, Mr. Speaker, and this has put a strain on an already strained healthcare system. So my question to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, what contact has the Minister had with the Capital District to provide assistance in dealing with the emergency room situation?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the question, and as I indicated previously with respect to the issue of surgeries, we are in constant contact with the authorities to provide whatever assistance we can to monitor the situation and to ensure that we can be as responsive as we need to be in assisting them in returning to normal.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the situation requires more than just monitoring right now, Mr. Minister, and I can't believe that you haven't taken any action to help assist with at least the emergency room situation. You could provide funding, Mr. Speaker, so that the Cobequid Multi-Service Centre could stay open, for instance, a little later to deal with the backlog. You could set up and broadcast a telephone line so that people could relay their symptoms, perhaps, I'm just suggesting, and receive advice until all the doctor's offices are open again. Or you could make contact with other health districts, Mr. Speaker, to see if they could perhaps assist with surgeries. Just some ideas, Mr. Speaker, from the Minister. But, Mr. Speaker, it all requires additional money. And here we go. Your $155 check is coming back to haunt you once again. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister: why is the Minister more content with saving money than addressing the health care needs of HRM?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I do not accept the premise of the honourable member's question.
The honourable member Cold Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Mr. Speaker, there's no question that Hurricane Juan cut a swath through the middle of this province. And Mr. Speaker, the approach of Nova Scotia's federal cabinet minister seems to be that any assistance to fishermen, farmers, and others affected in Nova Scotia is going to come out of existing ACOA programs, including the Atlantic Innovation Fund. This statement is, quite frankly, outrageous, Mr. Speaker, and it totally fails to understand the scope of this situation. So my question to the Premier is, what discussions has the Premier had with Mr. Thibeault about the fact that any federal assistance needs to be over and above existing programs?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate the question because it allows me to report to the House that in conversations this morning that I and the Minister responsible for emergency measures had with two federal cabinet ministers, Minister Thibeault, Mr. McCollum. We indicated that there were situations that did seem to fall outside of current programs. We asked them to look at those kinds of situations and see if additional funding outside of existing programs could be made available.
The honourable member for Coal Harbour Eastern Passage on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, whenever we talk about a disaster and damages from those disasters, that's an emergency, and the funds must come from an emergency fund. If we take it from existing funds like ACOA or the Atlantic Innovation Fund, someday someone's going to be shortchanged. That money is meant for things non-disaster, non-emergency related. So my question to the Premier is, what does the Premier plan to do to ensure that Nova Scotia gets its rightful share of federal funding, emergency funding, Mr. Speaker, to help fishermen, farmers, and others affected in this province?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a good question. I believe we made a significant step forward today in having a direct dialogue with two federal cabinet ministers, articulating for them and to them the problem as we understand it today. They have been receptive to the things that we presented to them today. Obviously, if they are to make an extraordinary response, which means a response outside of established programs, they have to get some kind of cabinet approval. But today we were able to lay out for them a framework of a problem as we see it.
The honourable member Cole-Harbour for passage on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do want to acknowledge that the Premier has begun the process of dealing with the federal minister who clearly seems to not appreciate the need for emergency funding with regard to this disaster. In particular, Mr. Speaker, we can talk about the disaster financial assistance funding, but that only covers a bare minimum of the problems that are going to be faced by Nova Scotians in the coming months. To be told that existing funding from other programs means that somebody at some point will be shortchanged, Mr. Speaker, and we in the opposition will not stand for that. So my question to the Premier is, will he commit in this House that his government will stand up to the federal government and will continue to put pressure on them to ensure that emergency funds are available for an emergency and that existing funds will not be used?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The answer to the first part of the question is yes. I'm uncertain as to exactly what the member was driving at in the second part of his question, but if he was asking, is the government prepared to negotiate additional funding outside of disaster relief with the federal government to mitigate what has happened on Sunday night and Monday morning? The answer to that, again, is yes.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister responsible for Emergency Measures Organization. On Monday and Tuesday of this week, while under a municipal state of emergency, homeowners were attempting to clean up their properties and remove hazards. Everyone was working hard. No one had any other option. The province, through EMO, advised all non-essential employees to stay at home on Monday and Tuesday unless contacted by a supervisor asking them to come in. I will table the press release EMO sent about this. Of course, it's understandable that they would have as few people as possible interfering with the cleanup efforts and for safety and efficiency. Will the Minister confirm for this House that the province, through EMO, advised all non-essential employees in the HRM to stay at home on Monday and Tuesday? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Yes, all provincial employees in the HRM area as well as some other affected areas were advised to remain at home if they were not essential on Monday and Tuesday this week past.
Now, member Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you'll have to excuse me if I'm perplexed with the Minister's answer. You see, even though the province directed people not to come to work with some provincially funded agencies are now telling employees who obeyed the EMO directive to stay at home that they may be docked pay. I will table 2 memos sent to the employees of the IWK hospital, which say that they would be paid for day shifts on Monday, but would be forced to take vacation days if they did not return for work on Monday night or Tuesday. My question is to the Minister. Can you explain to this House why provincially funded agencies are docking people pay because they obeyed a directive issued by EMO?
The Honourable Minister of Emergency Measures Organization.
I think the member will find, first of all, in total clarity, there was a proviso with District Health Capital employees that they are the employer and they were dealing with those employees. But I certainly would like to have a copy. Of the memo so that I can have it investigated further, Speaker.
Y'all member Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I table those for the Minister. Many of the affected employees are just returning to work today, Mr. Speaker. Some may still be at home dealing with disastrous aftermath of the hurricane. They may not even know of this unfair loss of pay. Minister, all of these employees deserve an explanation why they're being penalized for their following rules set out by the province. Will the Minister undertake to report back to the House by tomorrow about how widespread this practice is across provincially funded agencies, and what will he do to correct it? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister responsible for EMO.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I guess I misunderstood the IWK when I made my statement earlier. It is not part of the Capital Health District, Mr. Speaker. And I just wanted to correct that in my previous answer. But I certainly have no problem of reporting back tomorrow on what the honourable member has raised.
Thank you. The honourable member for Victoria, the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, My question is to the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia. During times of crisis, consumers may be placed at an unfair disadvantage with regard to supply and demand. In the Emergency Measures Act, it states that during a state of emergency, no person in the province may charge higher prices for food, clothing, fuel, equipment, medical or other essential supplies, or for the use of property, services, resources, or equipment than the fair market value of the same thing immediately before the emergency. My question to the Minister is, what is his department doing to ensure that there is no price gouging as a result of Hurricane Juan?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. We will work closely with the EMO and with the other departments affected to ensure that that doesn't happen and apply the full extent of the law, Mr. Speaker.
Now, member for Victoria Lakes on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we have had calls from people who claim that batteries are being sold individually at higher prices and that rooms in some hotels that were going at one rate last week are more expensive this week. At the very least, the Minister's Department should tell Nova Scotians that it is illegal to charge more in a state of emergency. Will the Minister bring the full weight of consumer protection to bear upon people who may be trying to unfairly profit from this disaster?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. I would ask him that if he has specific information about those types of claims that he provided with our departments, and yes, we will apply the full extent of the law.
The Honourable Member for Victoria Lakes on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, many homes will need electricians to get their house ready for new power. The backlog will be as much as 9 days because electrical contractors are stretched to the limit. People still need batteries, food, and lodging. Can the Minister pledge to do everything possible to ensure that laws are obeyed in this state of local emergency so that consumers are protected?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the answer is yes.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Environment and Labour. Making sure we have clean drinking water and safe water should be an absolute priority right now. Yesterday, I raised my concerns in this House. In response, the Minister said if people are worried, they should boil their water for 3 minutes. To date, this government still has not issued boil water advisories or outlined how they are going to help thousands of homeowners with water quality problems. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister is when can we expect your government to take action on this critical matter?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
I'd like to thank the member for the question, and we'll have information going out this afternoon.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the government issued a release warning people about food safety, candle use, appliances, and even smoke detectors. But no warning was given about water quality, even though 40% of Nova Scotians rely on well water that may have been affected by this storm. So we need 3 things: immediate boil water advisories, subsidized water tests, and an interim water supplies for those in need. Mr. Minister, how long will we have to wait for these 3 safety measures to be implemented?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the member for the question. Yes, as I mentioned yesterday, anybody who has any concern and has a well or a private well should certainly take every precaution if they believe that the water has been breached and is contaminated in any way, and make sure they do not consume that water. Currently, the fire departments have set up stations and will provide safe drinking water for people who are in need, and they just need to find out the location of their nearest fire department and obtain that water. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Minister said he's been talking with his staff about drinking water protection, yet we're still waiting for adequate action. It's the responsibility of this government to ensure that we have safe drinking water, especially in times of crisis. Mr. Minister, what is your action plan?
Now, Minister of Environment and Labour.
I'd like to thank the member for the question again. At this point in time, anybody who has any concerns can contact the Department of Environment, and they'll receive advice as to what they should do with regards to wells Municipal water is certainly being monitored from municipalities and the Department of Environment, and we are confident at this point in time that things are progressing as they should.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization. Yesterday, a call was placed to the EMO office looking for information as where to people in the HRM could be directed to receive information. Mr. Speaker, the caller was told that there were no shelters available where people could go and get information. Mr. Speaker, I find that quite shocking. Perhaps maybe this government should take a refresher course from the U.S. on how to be able to establish shelters in times of emergency. My question to the minister: why did EMO fail to set up any shelters and instead relied on media to relay information, media that many homes are unable to access?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we did set up shelters across this province to receive people who needed refuge from the storm. And as of yesterday, the major one here, the Sportsplex in HRM, Sydney, over Dartmouth Sportsplex, I believe there was 15 residents there. Normally, shelters are for people. Telephone lines and media outlets are for information.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, people are receiving all sorts of mixed messages. Mr. Speaker, it's not right. I note with interest, Mr. Speaker, that the minister responsible for EMO has access to 1,550 volunteers on the ground search and rescue team, and that can be called out to assist in any number of different emergency situations. My question to the minister: why has the minister not called out any of these volunteers to assist?
The honourable minister responsible for EMO.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member opposite, a very important and good question. The situation here certainly isn't one of removing, thank goodness, injured people from buildings in the aftermath. We had, unfortunately, 2 fatalities, which is very disheartening, but as far as injuries and aftermath of that sort, after the hurricane had proceeded, the major priority was reestablishing power. The federal government has committed now over 1,000 troops here to the HRM area to help clear brush and assist the Nova Scotia Power in getting power back up, which is the #1 priority, as pointed out by members opposite, for people's lifestyle and well-being. Those activities for the Army are directed by Nova Scotia Power crews because, Mr. Speaker, as you well realize, power and the safety around reinstalling and recharging lines is paramount. The Army are supplying that well-coordinated personnel with Pacific individuals who have those skills and who can monitor and work with the situation. At this point, the skills of search and rescue are not required, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I believe people's lives are more important than power. Our leader expressed earlier concerns about the Sir John Thompson Manor. There are countless other facilities like this across the HRM. Even if you'd called out 100 people to knock on each of the door to see if there was anything that they require or if they were okay, this would have been a great asset indeed and comfort to the residents, especially the seniors. My question to the minister: why has the minister not used his authority to call in the resources that could assist in helping people in the HRM as our seniors?
The honourable minister responsible for the EMO.
Again, Emergency Measure Organization is a well-organized and coordinated effort by governmental agencies as well as independent agencies such as the food bank, such as the Red Cross, and community centers. As well, the municipality of HRM are running the information centers in this locale, the same as would happen in Truro, the same as would happen in Lunenburg, the same as would happen in Pictou. That's how the chain of events and command occurs. Here in HRM, seniors and a number of residents have been supplied with food and with drinks while the power is out, and any situations that are called in or reported between those organizations and community services that pointed out earlier, aid is obtained on an immediate basis, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, perhaps one of the most tragic outcomes in the aftermath of Hurricane Juan is the amount of spoiled food that families have been forced to discard. For many people, it is an inconvenience, but for low-income families, seniors, and those on social assistance and the disabled, it is a crisis. Yesterday, the minister advised the people on employment supports and income assistance simply to have to call their caseworker. I asked the Minister of Community Services, how much assistance can families and individuals expect to receive to help replace the lost food?
The honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for raising this important question. It is true that last Friday was the date for the monthly social assistance check, and as such, for those that buy on a monthly basis and put it in the freezer, it can lead to a serious situation with this extended power outage. And as I did point out yesterday, the caseworkers are there to assist the clients because everybody's case is a little different from their neighbors. There is a basic amount of $50 per family, and then it goes up based on the number of children, but that's just an initial assist. And if that's not sufficient to address the problem, they should get back to their caseworker, and we will work with them.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd want to know how the minister calculated that kind of a method for to develop a $50 basic amount to each one of those families, and if the minister will table that tomorrow in this House. Mr. Speaker, Louise Butler is a disabled person, and she is a diabetic. For several months, she purchased meat and vegetables when they were on sale, filling her freezer with enough food to help her through the winter. When she faced the added expenses such as heating, when she will face the added expenses such as heating and electricity. Yesterday, she had to throw out the entire contents of her freezer, which represent months' worth of food. I asked the Minister of Community Services. His department are telling people that they will get $50. How does he expect Louise Butler to eat all winter on that amount of $50?
Here, 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 here.
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member. That is exactly why you have caseworkers. That's why you go to them, you explain your circumstances, how you manage to build up your food supply for the winter when the heating season kicks in. That's exactly the reason why you should go to your caseworker, and I appreciate the member opposite's giving me the chance to explain that yet again, that everybody's situation is unique. The $50 will get them through for a few days. If that's not sufficient, then by explaining those circumstances to the caseworker, the appropriate provisions can be put in place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth North on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to remind the honourable minister that the number of calls that have come through my office this morning, the maximum amount so far the Department of Community Services has offered is $50. That's not even a meal on a plate. This House receives $65 for per diems. So, Mr. Speaker, our office has been flooded with calls from people in a similar situation. They literally have nothing to eat. Families bought food meant to last them a month longer, and now they have nothing. My question to the minister, will you assure this House that adequate support and assistance will be there to ensure that these Nova Scotians do not go hungry because of Hurricane Juan?
Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the honourable member once again for allowing me to have the chance to assure those people that have been hurt by the aftermath of Hurricane Juan, by loss of their power, that by working through their caseworker, that we will address their individual circumstances to assure them that they will not be without for the aftermath of the hurricane.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, for over a year now, we have heard from Nova Scotia homeowners, especially seniors and low-income earners, about their home insurance either being cancelled or being faced with huge increases. Mr. Speaker, this government's record of dealing with issues in a timely manner is tenuous at best, especially when one is reminded of auto insurance. Mr. Speaker, this has been an issue that has been pressing on this province for well over a year and long before Hurricane Juan hit the shores of Nova Scotia. My question, therefore, to the Minister responsible for insurance is, can the Minister please explain to this House what plans, if any, he has in place to address property insurance in order to protect Nova Scotia homeowners?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
To me.
Is that order, please? Was the Premier or Deputy Premier? The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yes, the problem with property insurance has been around, as the member points out, for quite some considerable time. And I'd point out it's not a problem confined to Nova Scotia. It is one that is Canada-wide, and it's one in which the federal government also has a role. Mr. Speaker, we are actively pursuing the establishment of an automobile review insurance board at the present time, and as a part of that board's mandate will be to monitor and to accept recommendations as to what action can be taken to protect the public of Nova Scotia when they purchase property, casualty, and liability insurance.
The honourable member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, the Minister has just admitted that this has been a long-standing problem for well over a year. Today's October 1st. If we're to go with the Minister's solution, he's already indicated to us that his insurance review board will not be up and running before January, at best, of 2004. So it's been a year, it's now October 1st, and we're being asked to tell Nova Scotians to wait at least another 3 or 4 months. Mr. Speaker, many Nova Scotia seniors and low-income earners in this province go to bed at night without any property insurance. They've had insurance in some cases for 40 years and have been suddenly cut off. To tell these people to wait until an insurance board is set up in January is clearly unacceptable, and once again is a sign of how this government is dragging its feet in dealing with issues that affect Nova Scotians. My question, therefore, to the Minister is, since the trend has clearly shown that increased premiums for property insurance was well in place in Nova Scotia long before Hurricane Juan arrived, is this Minister today prepared to allow property insurance to reach a crisis situation before he's prepared to take immediate action?
The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I find it passing strange that the member for Richmond, who is encouraging the government to move with great rapidity, when he was speaking about auto insurance, was recommending that it go to the URB for resolution. And if I remember correctly, the last time a matter of insurance went to URB, it took a year for resolution. Mr. Speaker, we at least have moved on that front with the establishment of an insurance review board, which will be up and running as soon as we get this bill through the House. We will be in the process of appointing members and establishing their mandate and having them up and running. And Mr. Speaker, I would suggest to you that this board will be very, very active in all realms of insurance in this province.
Sure. The honourable member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Insurance Review Board that he speaks of does not exist in this province. The Minister knows that. There are no members, there's no office, there's no phone number, although they're big on phone numbers. Why don't you give us the phone number for the Insurance Review Board? It just doesn't exist, and it will not exist for at least another 4 months at best. Its mandate is still not clear. It's gone from auto insurance, now home insurance, and everything else is going to be thrown on it also. leaving Nova Scotia homeowners who go to bed tonight without insurance wondering how much longer must they wait until this government is prepared to take action. Being that the minister is clearly not interested, my final supplementary to the Premier. When is the Premier prepared to finally take a leadership role in this province and ensure Nova Scotia homeowners who have had property insurance all their lives and have been suddenly cut off as to when this government will take action so that Nova Scotians can get property insurance as they've had for years long ago? Thank you.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the member opposite does bring up, by way of his question, the new dimension that Hurricane Juan will place on property insurance. You only have to do a minimum amount of touring around the province to look at the amount of house damage that has occurred on Sunday night and Monday morning. So the problem, in fact, has become even more acute. But what the member opposite, I think, is urging the government to do, and exactly what the government is going to do, is to put in place, with all possible speed, an independent insurance bureau or review board that will deal with all aspects of insurance. And we will do that immediately on passage of the bill. So I would urge members of the House to expedite passage of the bill.
The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, I learned that Tallahassee Community School in Eastern Passage will be closed for probably 6 to 8 weeks at least due to the storm damage from Hurricane Juan. I'm also told that there'll probably be a community meeting tomorrow night to discuss future arrangements with regard to that school. And we've heard other stories, Mr. Speaker, of other schools or rumors of other schools that may have been damaged by the storm. So I want to ask the Minister of Education if he can provide us with a detailed list of the schools that have been damaged and where they are.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Speaker. Tallahassee School was probably the hardest hit in the province. It lost its roof, and there's going to have to be some adjustment made for that population for 6 to 8 weeks. The board is meeting with the people tomorrow night, and they've been discussing it. Shore, all schools open today, reporting no service disruptions. Tri-County, all schools open, no disruptions. Strait, all schools open, no disruptions. Halifax Regional School Board, all schools closed today until the end of the week. And what they're doing is a lot of that's power related, Mr. Speaker, and they've got to get in there and they've got to allow 24 hours to examine the schools. And the other thing is people would know, particularly with primary kids, primary young people, if they are walking to school and there are wires down, the streets have to be safe before they can be allowed to proceed to school.
Here, here.
The CSAP schools, thank you. I thank the member from Cape Breton Centre for that helpful intervention. No damage to those schools. They are closed. Chignecto Central, the schools are closed. A number of schools, all schools in Pictou County with the exception of River John Consolidated is open, and I understand that that's a power problem. In Cumberland County, all schools with the exception of Wallace and Wentworth. Again, I understand that's in your constituency, Mr. Speaker, and I do believe that's a power problem. Again, no physical damage to the schools. Cape Breton, Victoria, no damage to the schools. There in Annapolis Valley, we have not heard of any reports of damages there. Colleges and universities, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. I really appreciate the information for the House, but perhaps the Honourable Minister could table that and all members could read it. The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I was actually hoping maybe the Minister could identify specific schools other than Tallahassee. I think we've heard rumors of Sackville High School, for example, being damaged, and I was hoping the Minister might be able to provide us with some information as to which schools were specifically damaged.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I've heard.
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Speaker. The only two schools in Halifax County that I've heard of specific major damage have been Tallahassee and Sackville High. In the case of Sackville High, what happened is that the roof, I think, came off the gym or something happened, and it may provide some displacement of students, but that's not yet been determined. We have not had reports of severe damage to other schools that would prevent them from reopening.
The honourable member Cole Harbour for passage on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, obviously, there's a lot of questions surrounding those two schools and potentially others when the power comes back to them. One of the biggest questions is who is going to be paying for the needed repairs, and cash-strapped schools across the province are wondering how they're going to deal with the disaster, Mr. Speaker, and including under-resourced teachers who are worried about the impact on the classroom and on resource teachers. So my final question to the minister is, can the minister give assurances today that the province will be stepping in to fund any repairs of these schools and that they will not be coming out of budgets directed to classroom activity?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I add something to the last question? I forgot there was a school in my own constituency that lost 3 windows, the high school there. Mr. Speaker, we don't know the financial extent of those damages and whether they're insured or whether they're not insured at this particular time, but I want to assure the honourable member is that money will not be coming out of classrooms to affect those repairs.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on July 20th, 2003, the councillor for the local community where I reside issued a letter to all the residents indicating that he had developed with friends and an engineer a 4-year roads plan for the roads within Cape Breton West, and that plan had been provided to the former Minister of Transportation and Public Works on July 3rd, 2003 for his review and approval. I will table this letter for the present minister. I would ask if the present Minister of Transportation and Public Works would be willing to confirm if in fact there is such a plan, and if so, will he table it in this House?
So you, the Honourable Deputy Premier.
Yes, come on.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I will have to check with the previous minister to find out what particular list he was referring to, but I can assure the honourable member that if the list is around, he can have it.
The honourable member of Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the minister was a little tone deaf. Yesterday he introduced a resolution on this very issue, and today I didn't indicate that I was talking about a specific list. I was talking about a 4-year plan that was submitted to the minister's office. In fact, it was confirmed in a letter on July 16th by the former minister and signed Michael G. Baker, QC, confirming that that 4-year plan had been submitted. And I would ask if the minister would confirm if, in fact, the Marion Bridge Highway was included in that 4-year plan, and when the government, in fact, plans to pave that roadway.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Very good question, Mr. Speaker, and I'll have to take it under advisement.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in 1999, the government indicated in its Blue Book that it was going to prepare in its first term a 10-year nonpartisan plan for road construction, maintenance, and improvement in the province. And to date, we haven't seen that. Yet we've seen evidence of the Marion Bridge Highway paving project being put on hold, the number 4 highway paving latest upgrade section being put on hold, the upgrading of the number 4 highway that was announced by the former Minister of Economic Development with great fanfare, that's now put on hold. Many suspect it's to enhance road improvements in Cape Breton North during the last provincial election. So my question to the Minister of Transportation and Public Works, will you please table in detail what your roads plan is for Cape Breton County before this House rises in this session?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to advise the honourable member for Cape Breton West that the amount of capital dollars expended by the Department of Transportation in Cape Breton this year has just been phenomenal in this past construction year. And Mr. Speaker, that also happened in the prior year. Mr. Speaker, with regard to Highway 4, and if the member wants to contact me about any particular road, he can certainly do so. But with regard to Highway 4, I think he's well aware that that particular section came in way over the estimation, and that is why the contract was not proceeded with.
Order, please. Now, Mr. Transportation has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this is what the minister is telling you. And Mr. Speaker, this does happen periodically. I had a road, Mr. Speaker, in my constituency that came in way over on two. It was put out for tender, came in way over. It was turned down. We put out tender again, and it was still too high, so we sent it back again for re-tender. Third time, lucky, it came in okay.
Order, please.
I can suggest
Thank you. Order, please. Now, member Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the minister responsible for the Utility and Review Board. Mr. Speaker, tens of thousands of Nova Scotians remain without power in the aftermath of Hurricane Juan. Nova Scotia Power officials have stated that the hurricane is the worst disaster the utility has ever had to face, and there's no doubt the destruction is massive. However, the number of linesmen at the Nova Scotia Power and its ability to repair damaged lines quickly has been, or has long been a concern. So I asked the minister responsible for the Utility and Review Board, will he be recommending that staffing levels be reviewed for any possible connection to extended power outages after the hurricane?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
I'd like to thank the member for the question. There's no question that when we finish this ordeal and get power restored, there will be a complete review, and we will be reviewing all things that take place to ensure that things are where they should be.
Now, member Pictou West, on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in 1997, two back-to-back winter storms resulted in massive power outages lasting as long as 78 hours. The Utility and Review Board investigated and found that an insufficient number of linesmen was a major factor in that extended outage. The UARB went so far in its 1998 findings to recommend that Nova Scotia Power report back on the cost of returning staff to the 1994 levels. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the minister is, can the minister responsible for the UARB explain what actions have been taken since then to ensure that Nova Scotia Power has adequate staff to address emergencies such as Hurricane Juan?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. That's information that I'm not aware of at this time, but I will endeavor to review that. But it is up to Nova Scotia Power to determine their levels of staffing.
Now, member Pictou West, on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as of 1998, Nova Scotia Power had cut its linemen by 30%, and further cuts have occurred since then, including 40 apprentice linesmen just last year. So I asked the minister, we have seen the many consequences this week of extended outages. Will he request the UARB to investigate staffing levels at the Nova Scotia Power?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. It wouldn't matter, I don't believe, how many linesmen we had right now. It wouldn't be enough. We certainly have people that are coming in from other areas to help out with this catastrophe and disaster that we have. But I'm sure that Nova Scotia Power will be reviewing their levels of staffing after the storm is complete. Thank you.
Now, member Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Transportation and Public Works. On September 4th, Mitchell Coswell was seriously injured when he was struck by a car while crossing the Sydney-Glace Bay Highway. The highway is a link to hospitals, the airport, UCCB, call centers, and many shopping centers. Yet it doesn't have adequate crosswalks and has no sidewalk on one side. I asked the minister, how much longer is the safety of drivers and pedestrians going to go unaddressed on this highway?
Now, Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I understand there's an ongoing review of the signage on that highway, and as well as with the signage, the requirement for traffic signals, electric traffic signals.
The honourable member Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Kites Hill Road intersection on the Sydney-Glace Bay Highway has been seen of multiple collisions and injuries in recent years. Yet, the minister just spoke about the recent evaluation states that the intersection doesn't have enough points to qualify for a set of lights to provide safe access and slow down traffic. I asked the minister, how many more people have to be injured before this dangerous intersection gets a set of lights?
There you go. Minister of Transportation, Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, certainly the safety of pedestrians and the safety of motorists is the #1 priority of the department, and we will do our very best in every case to keep those numbers at 0.
The honourable member Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I tabled a petition today with over 200 signatures of residents who are afraid every time they have to use this intersection. I asked the minister, will you commit to having your staff review this decision in the light of the danger this intersection poses to residents?